They've been stuck in the woods for over a year without their parents having had no way of getting word to you about it because they've been looking after their children for so long, said Rose. They asked us to come up here and ask that you send them carriages to get them back up to the house where they can take better care of the younglings with your help. They seem to be wearing thin. Geoffrey's brow furrowed. He sat silently for a moment. Yes, I'll do that today and get it sorted. I'll make sure to go to the carriage company and get them there as soon as possible to pick the children up. It shouldn't take more than a day or two to get them back up here, he said, relaxing slightly. Thank you for telling me about this. I had no idea that had happened. To think that young Miss Sampson and Master Tammas had to take care of so many by themselves is jarring, to say the least. Jeffries leaned back in his chair, squinting behind his glasses. He placed his paws behind his glasses and squeezed his fingers into his closed eyes. He rubbed them in a circular motion. I had no idea what was happening. Here's me keeping the house tidy and collecting the mail like nothing had gone wrong. I should have known something was happening, said Jeffries. He sighed deeply, releasing his grip and bringing his paws down to his side. Rose stared at him, feeling badly for the wombat. It's all right. They're doing fine. The children are all very healthy and getting along very well. They've done a great job by themselves, she said reassuringly. Jeffries turned to her and offered a bitter smile. They're my charges, Miss Mouse. It's my duty to look after them until they're old enough to look after themselves. It was not my intention to strand them in the forest and hope they did well. I'm glad Sampson and Tammas were able to handle the brood well enough, but it's still my fault for not being able to keep in touch with them properly. I should have known something was wrong, but since the letters from their parents were rare if ever sent, it didn't show that anything was wrong on my end. I had expected to see Sir and Madame Amberstone before the next winter, as I usually made a trip up to the city to take care of their affairs and order more books, but that isn't for months, said Jeffries. He stood up from the table. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to send a message to the carriage company now and let them know they have animals waiting for their business. The pathway that leads to the cabin is overgrown, so you may want to tell them to look for it by the side of the bridge, offered Barkland. Tammas and Sampson had the children packing up their while we traveled up here. They should be ready to go the moment the carriage drivers find them. Jeffries returned a tight-lipped smile and turned from the table. He walked quickly from the room and disappeared into the house once again. The others gathered their lunch and ate it while waiting for him to return. He seems very worried, says Rose, biting into her watercress sandwich and chewing slowly. Well, if he had helped raise those children, I would have figured that to be a normal reaction, don't you think? Responded Samuel. He feels personally responsible for their hardship, the kind fellow, said Rose. Do you see how unhappy he looked when he heard that it had been months since their parents had disappeared? Asked Sparkling. He must value these raccoons as his family. Averly and the others nodded. Seems so, said Rose. They finished their sandwiches. Averly got up from the table with her plate and headed over to the tray, and using the tongs served herself another sandwich. She refilled her cup as well, and returned to the table. She sat down and bit into her next serving. Samuel spoke up. What do you think is going to happen next? He asked the table. No one responded for a while, unsure themselves of what would happen. Well, we'll see how he's doing once he gets back and go from there, said Averly, finishing her second sandwich. The travelers sat and enjoyed their meal. The others each took turns gathering a second helping for themselves and returned to the table to enjoy Jeffrey's efforts. A few minutes later, Jeffries returned to the dining hall, stepping back into the room looking markedly happier than when he had left. The scowl had left his face and he was walking slowly. All right, the carriages will be on their way within 30 minutes, and they know to look for the pathway beyond the bridge, and then it may take a while to find it. They'll bring them back up here, and I'll be able to take care of them properly once they've arrived. I asked the driver to leave a note for their parents, and in the off chance they return to find the house empty, said Jeffries. He moved to the cart in the corner of the room. Do you mind if I eat with you? It's about my tea time, and it would be nice to eat with others for a change. Of course. We really would enjoy eating with you, said Samuel. The wombat's face scrunched up as he smiled, revealing small, sharp teeth. He took a plate and a cup from the cart and served himself and moved towards them. He sat down at the table where he had been sitting next to Samuel. He took a white linen napkin from his breast pocket and unfolded it, placing it on his lap and patting it gently. Jeffries took a small bite of his sandwich and smiled, enjoying the taste, and chewed slowly. Once he had finished chewing, he swallowed his bite and took a sip of his mead. He took the napkin from his lap and dabbed it at the corners of his mouth and placing it squarely back against his knees. Would you all like to stay here until the others get up from the forest? Asked Jeffries after a moment. We have plenty of beds, and I'm sure Mr. and Master Amberstone would be ever so happy to see you once they arrived. Well, that would be lovely, said Rose, speaking for the group. They nodded. Ailey clasped her paws in front of her empty plate. There's something else we've got to ask you about, Mr. Jeffries, said Averly hesitantly. The aged wombat looked at her unwaveringly. Yes, my dear girl, what is it? Asked Jeffries, over his lunch plate. He stared at her. She looked away from his gaze for a moment, then brought her eyes back to his. We had a meeting with the Netherine Rams the night we spent with your family, said Averly. His eyes widened slightly, but his face showed no other change in emotion. He blinked slowly. Is that so, my dear? Asked Jeffries. Yes, it's the other reason that we came to you. Once we knew Thomas, Samson, and the others were taken care of, we were to ask you about a certain trinket for Avery, said Samuel. Jeffries pursed his lips. He studied the tattoo that covered half of Avery's face, how it wrapped around her eye and went down her cheek towards her muzzle. Did you meet Martin and the others? Asked Jeffries, not taking his eyes off Avery. They introduced themselves while we were there, said Rose. After we talked for what seemed like hours, we were given this, said Samuel. He reached into his pocket for the rolled paper he had been given. Samuel handed the paper Martin had given him to Jeffries. He rolled it out on the table next to his lunch and read it quickly. Jeffries rolled the paper back up and tucked it into his pocket where the napkin had been. He stared at Avery again. So you're a Cinderella, like Martin, said Jeffries, more to himself than anyone else. I suppose so, yes. Though I didn't know that was the case until a few days ago. I never really knew where the tattoo came from. It had always been there, and I stopped thinking about how I got it years ago, said Avery, unabashedly. Jeffrey studied her tattoo again, going over its shape with his eyes. Judging by the size and placement of it, you're possibly quite talented, said Jeffries. Avery blinked, not used to such an open-faced compliment. I have no idea. I've been practicing the runes Martin wrote down for me, and they've been flashing blue when I finish them. When I get through the spell, the whole collection for a spell that glowed in order until they faded after the last one lit up, said Avery, and she smiled at Jeffries. That is impressive. It's only been a few days since you found out you were a magic user and you're already able to get spells attempting to complete themselves without a focusing trinket, said Jeffries, taking another bite from his sandwich and dabbing at his mouth with his napkin again. He smiled at her. Can you give me a demonstration, please? He asked. Avery reached into her pocket and pulled out her spell paper and unfolded it in front of her on the table. She went to the clerical spell, since that was the smaller and easier of the spells to do. She traced her claw along the tabletop and blue light followed her movement. The runes lit and faded in series until she completed them, and then they all lit up systematically in order and faded from view. Jeffries clapped his paws together appreciatively and grinned at her. Do you know what color you're to start with? Asked Jeffries. Avery hesitated momentarily. Purple. Martin said it had to be a purple hexagonal gem set in silver. Something about the type of magic that would first let me learn, said Avery, getting more excited with each word. He gave me 3 spells to learn once I had it. One of them is a messaging spell. I'm to send him a message that it worked once we had the trinket and I know how to use it. Jeffries looked at her and then turned to the others, clapping his paws together again. All right, well, let's get your bed set up and your gear packed away, and then we can go and see what we can do about your trinket, he said to Avery. The group smiled at him. Thanks so much, said Avery. I've been looking forward to this for days. It's all I can think about. Let me clear away this mess, and I'll take you to your rooms, said Jeffries. He got up quickly from his unfinished lunch and cleared away their plates and cups and placed them on top of the silver tray. He moved the tray out of the room and returned shortly. The others waited in their seats as he finished his work. All right, then, let's go, shall we? He asked, motioning towards the hallway beyond the dining area. He walked out through the doorway as the others pushed in their chairs and followed him out of the room. They made their way down the hallway, passing rooms on either side. To the right is the main living room, where you can sit and relax for the day if you like, said Jeffries. On our left is the Amberstone Library's first floor. You can reach that through either of these doors we're passing. He motioned to the 3 doors that they were walking by. You're welcome to peruse them at your leisure if you would like. The family has spent generations filling the shelves with only the best and rarest books and tomes they could find. The travelers peered into the vast room of shelves beyond the open books. Barkland couldn't help but smile at what he saw. That's going to be amazing, he thought to himself. They moved on, coming to a stone staircase that had sprawled to the left as they walked up it. They made it to the second floor landing, and Jeffries stopped before deep cherrywood doors. This is the second floor of the library. If you go through here and head right, the game room is situated above the living room. There's a staircase that leads to it for easier access if you don't feel like walking the length of the house, said Jeffries. They continued up the stairs from the landing. The staircase was adorned with paintings much larger than the animals that passed beneath them. Raccoons from varying eras stared down at them. Most were stern-looking male raccoons with fanciful facial hair and powdered wigs. A few elegant females dotted the walls, breaking the flow of drab brown and green garments with light pinks, yellows, and soft pastel blues. The group passed generations of the Amberstone dynasty as they made their way up the stairs. They came to the third floor landing, which led directly into the large wooden framed stone-walled hallway with doors branching out from either side. The hallway was massive, stretching far away from the group and rounding the corner to the right. Jeffries made his way down the hallway, and the others followed behind him. These are the bedrooms for all the children and our guests, said Jeffries. He stopped in front of the 4th door on the right side of the corridor and paused. The others waited quietly behind him. Jeffries placed his paws in his pocket and rummaged for his keys. He pulled out a large brass ring of keys and flicked through them until he found the one he wanted. Placing the key into the door's lock, he twisted the key and the door unlocked with an audible click. He pushed the door open and walked inside. The group behind him followed. As they came into a room, they could see that there were beds arranged against the farthest wall. The room was quite large. Rose looked around and noticed that on the walls of each preceding side were sliding wooden partitions that rolled on tracks from the ceiling and plankwood flooring below. The partitions were placed edge to edge, effectively creating a private space for the group. She walked up to one and put her paw between the two partitions, pushing slightly. They glided effortlessly along their tracks, making a low rumbling sound, and she could see that behind the partitions was another room built in the same style with the beds arranged differently. Is this floor just one large subdivided room? She asked Jeffries. Yes. We found that with so many children that it was best if we had a way to spread out while it was raining, but to have the option for some privacy between the rooms if they wanted. The sliding doors were put in once the litter grew. The girls and boys share rooms split between the two so they can be comfortable, and the open walls let them share their time together whenever they want. It was Sir Amberstone's idea. It worked to great effect so far, replied Jeffries. Whose room is this? Asked Samuel. This is just one of the many guest rooms, actually. It was just easier to set the whole floor in the same way. If you need to lock the partitions in place, there are locks at the foot of each door that should allow you to place them in one place so the children don't bother you unnecessarily once they arrive, said Jeffries. The group walked around the large airy room. Jeffries walked over to the plate glass window set into the stone and cranked a lever on the side of the window frame. Slowly the window angled itself open and a fresh breeze broke across the room. Avery came and stood before the window and enjoyed the fresh air passing over her. From her vantage point, she could see well into the section of Old Town viewable from that side of the house and the peaks of the castle's towers in the distance. This city is huge, said Avery. Jeffries smiled at her. Centuries of growth, my dear, replied Jeffries. That archway you passed through on your way here used to be one of the city's old border gates. But as we grew peaceful and prosperous, we attracted many more animals between the walls, and it had to expand outward. The current edges of the city were built only 5 decades ago. Jeffries placed his arms behind his back and smiled smugly, scanning the view from the room. I haven't been up here much, other than the usual dusting and floor cleanings. It's nice to open the window and let the stale air out and enjoy the view. The travelers each picked a bed and dropped their backpacks off on top of them. You don't mind sleeping together, do you? Asked Jeffries. The group looked at one another and smiled at the elderly wombat. Of course not, replied Barkling. We've been sleeping around the fire together for almost a week. We're used to being around one another. Jeffries blinked twice. I'm happy to set you up in 2 rooms. Would you ladies like your own space for the time you're here? Jeffries asked the 2 women. Rose and Avery looked at one another and nodded at Jeffries. That would be great, said Avery. I wouldn't mind having some more space to myself, said Rose. I don't mean any harm, guys, but it would make it more comfortable to have less snoring voices each night, just as a break. She laughed as she thought about Barkland's deep snores she'd been accustomed to listening to for the last few nights. If that's what you want to do, then feel free, said Barkland, taking no notice of how Rose and Avery were smiling at him specifically. Rose and Avery picked up their backpacks and carried them to the door. Jeffries led the ladies out of the room and across the hallway. He searched for his keyring again, brought it out, and opened the door to the room. It had the same features as the room they had just been in, but the beds had been arranged against the movable partitions at the corners, facing inwards towards the center of the room and against the farthest wall beneath the windows. Rose moved to the end of the room where 2 of the beds were resting against the windowed wall and placed her backpack on the end of one of them. Avery took one of the beds by the door of the opposite corner. Would you like to stay here for a while and gather yourselves? Asked Jeffries. Avery laid down on her bed and stretched out her legs. Rose watched her relaxing and decided to do the same. I'll leave you up here for a while. I'm going to go finish my lunch. Please come down to the sitting room when you're ready, said Jeffries. He turned around and went out the door, closing it behind him as he left. Rose and Avery laid down on their beds, enjoying the warm sun-soaked room for a few minutes before Avery broke the silence. I really want to get to gym as soon as possible, said Avery, turning over to face Rose across the room. You'll have to let the fellow finish his lunch beforehand. It's only fair, responded Rose. Avery closed her eyes, puffing at her cheeks and blowing alongside between them. I know. You're right. I'm just excited is all, said Avery. There was a knock on the door. Come in, said Avery. The door opened and Samuel and Barkland entered. They sat down on the end of the bed between Avery and Rose. This place is pretty nice, isn't it? Said Samuel, looking out the window across the room. Rose turned and checked the skyline through the glass. A multitude of orange and brown rooftops and buildings of all sizes stretched out as far as the eye could see, broken by the cloud-covered hills near the horizon. Rose turned back to Samuel. It's very nice, said Rose affectionately. Samuel smiled at her. She returned in sentiment with a smile of her own. Barkland flopped down on the bed and stared up at the vaulted ceiling. He counted the exposed beams extending from one end to the other, unconsciously flexing his fist open and closed on alternating beams. He counted 17 across the width of the room, for they were broken by the divider bisecting the last beam. He sat up once he finished and gripped the edge of the bed. I think I'll head on down to the library and see what they have on this floor, said Barkland. All right, let us know if you find something worthwhile, said Samuel. Barkland got up and left the room. His footsteps could be heard receding down the hall as he went. Samuel turned to Avery. Don't you want to go down and get your gem figured out? Asked Samuel. More than anything, said Avery. She's waiting a while to let him have his lunch before she heads down, said Rose. Maybe he's a quick eater, offered Samuel. Avery shrugged and relaxed onto the soft blanket on top of the bed. I'm not going to race down and bother him. He's nice enough to let us into his home, after all, Avery said, pulling a pillow behind her head. Samuel flopped back on top of the bed he was sitting on and kicked his legs up into the air. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you went down now and got it sorted, said Samuel impatiently. Averly thought about it for a moment and suddenly sat up. Have you found out where the post office is? Averly asked, trying to change the subject. Rose pulled out the map from her jacket pocket and unrolled it on the bed spread before her. Samuel and Averly got up and came over and kneeled on the bed around the map. Well, we're here, said Rose, pointing to the small circled square that represented the Ambersons' house. She looked up at the map legend and saw the post office were marked with a letter with a feather laying across its length. She scanned the map for a while and saw that there were multiple offices within the city walls. She found the nearest one to the house and traced it back towards the circled square. It looks to be quite far from the house, said Rose, frowning and chewing her lower lip. Samuel bent over the map and tapped it near the house. It looks like we can take the tram here and it'll take us most of the way up towards the post office, said Samuel. He dragged a finger down the red line that represented the path of the tram's travel and stopped midway. A few streets over to the west, the letters outlined marked the location of the post office. I've never ridden a tram before, said Rose. Me either, replied Samuel. So I'll head to the tram stop and take one over here, and then it's just a few blocks over to the office. He traced the path with his claw. How do we know we're in the right part? Are there any landmarks near the spot you want to get off of? Responded Averly. Rose and Samuel checked the map. Looks like there is a giant clock tower just before we would need to get off, said Rose, looking at the clock stamped to the right of the red line in blue ink. Samuel checked the legend at the upper right-hand corner of the map. It looks like there's a station there. Mulberry Station? Said Samuel. He ran his finger along from the clock up a few blocks and then followed it to the nearest road to the post office. Yes, it looks like we can stop at the station and make our way up, take the turn there, and it should get us on the same street as the office, said Rose, following Samuel's finger on the map with her own. It shouldn't take more than an hour or two to get the message sent off. She grabbed her backpack from the side of the bed, reaching into the pack and pulled out a pen and paper. I'll write it now so we can get it sent off straight away, said Rose, taking the cap from her pen and laying the paper flat on the blanket on the bed. That's good, said Samuel. They sat and watched as Rose wrote the letter to her mother. When she was done, she folded it in half and then half again and placed it in her jacket pocket with the pen. I told them there had been a change of plans and we had gone up to Tanzania to help with the Amberstone family. I told them about meeting the raccoons at the bridge, but not about Barton and the others' visit. There's no point in worrying them about any of that. I also said that we would contact them again if there were any issues or changes in our plans if we had the chance, but not to worry about it, said Rose triumphantly. Averly started to chew on her index nail on her right paw. She looked to the door and back to the others. I think Geoffrey should have finished his sandwich by now, Averly said, turning back towards the door. I think I'll head down and go and see about my trinket. She turned back and faced the others, a questioning look in her eyes. She was clearly nervous about going down to see the gentleman wombat. That sounds like a good idea, said Rose, smiling at Averly. We'll stay here until you're done, then we'll head off over to the tram stop. Averly stopped biting her nail and got up from the bed. This is going to be fun, Averly said, turning to the door and smiling wide. She exited the room and made her way down the hall. Once her footfalls couldn't be heard any longer, Samuel moved over to Rose's bed and laid down next to her. She sidled over to make room for him. He took his paw and placed it over hers. She closed her own around his, and they both smiled, staring at the ceiling, watching the sunlight filter through the dust as it settled from Averly's exit. They laid like that quietly, enjoying the feeling of the warmth they shared with one another. Okay, well, I'm taking a break, so I might as well do some ads. This is my first one, so bear with me. So, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's pretty cool. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Hey people, take a listen to the Divergent Mind podcast. You get both insight into living with a serious mental illness and get to listen to a lovely tale about a journey cute little animals need to take. Don't miss out, and remember, divergent minds don't need to think alike.
So Anchor is asking me to ask you to support me financially. I would ask that you go to my Patreon to do that, which is patreon.com/divergentmind. It means you can either become a monthly subscriber at a different tier of $1 to $3 to $5. I'm not looking for a lot. I'm not asking for a lot. I'm not asking for anything. This is going to go to the end of my podcast. I don't like it when podcasts straight up ask you for money when I'm doing okay. Well, I'm not doing okay. I'm surviving now to the point that I can make this. I would love to be able to make improvements to this by, say, getting... So basically, I'm running off an iPad, and I would like to improve it by getting different things that would make it better. Maybe some headphones that monitor output, or a better mic, though the mic I got was from JWife, so I might not even use the better mic. You know what I mean? It's all about whatever I need at the time, but really it's just to get healthy again, because I'm currently over 300 pounds and I don't want to die that young. I would really like to be able to afford some vegetables so I can go back to my vegetarian diet, because being this big sucks. And I'm happy to sit in a chair all day, but I really got to walk my butt off, literally. So that's what the money would be for. It would be for healthy food, because I can't afford it. I can afford ramen and pasta and rice and beans, but I can't live on carbs, because that's how you get this big on antipsychotics. Junk food and carbs, which is just cheap and plentiful around me. So I would like to leave my house and just lose some weight. And to do that, I would like to go to the store and buy some vegetables, please. But you don't have to do anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm not begging. I'll figure it out on my own. Much pleasure, Jay. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that I have a YouTube channel called Taught Myself, and that I've decided to start selling merch already with a phrase that my brother showed me saying, "My disability is invisible," of which I made a hat for myself. So I decided to make hats, shirts, hoodies, for both men and women on spreadshirt.com. All you have to do is search for "My disability is invisible." It's in green, and that's mine. You'll know it's me because when you click the sale icon, the same little Divergent Mind icon comes up. And I hope you'll support me. I make about $5 per shirt or per sale. Everything else goes to Spreadshirt. But that's okay, because it's still a better deal than a lot of other places. And I really hope you'll support me. Come check me out on the YouTube. Teach me how to do that properly so I can have a community there too. And I await your response. Have a lovely day. Jay.